What's up guys, my name is Justin Loria, and today we're going to drill down and identify every possible reason you might be having trouble landing your kickflips, and then tell you exactly what you need to do in order to fix it and start landing them every try. Now, real quick, before we get into the list of possible issues you might be having, first I want to go over the proper technique to do a kickflip so that we have a baseline to work from and reference once we start going over all of the common problems. Being able to do an ollie is an essential first step to being able to do a kickflip, so if you haven't learned those yet, you can watch my tutorial on them by clicking the link up here or in the description section below. So now to do a kickflip, first you're going to want to position your feet on the board for the most part like this, with your front foot positioned over the front wheels at a slight angle and your back foot positioned on the tail in the same place that you'd put it in to do an ollie. Now, whereas for an ollie, you're going to be dragging your front foot up the board so that you're aiming for the center of the tail, for a kickflip, you're instead going to be aiming so that this part of your shoe right here, right over top of where your pinky toe is aiming for this area of the board right here where the side of the board meets the nose, which we call the pocket. Now, as you pop the tail off of the ground, just like you would for an ollie, bend at your ankle and slide your front foot up the grip tape, not sideways or down like you might think, and focus on pulling the board up off of the ground with your front foot. Then, as your front foot gets to the pocket, you're going to want to flick your front foot out, which is going to do two things. First, it's going to make the board start rotating really fast. Second, it's going to push the nose of the board down so that the back of the board is going to come up, allowing you to catch it with your back foot once it's done flipping all the way around. Alright, so now that you understand exactly what it is that you're going for, let's take a look at how skaters normally progress through the process of learning how to do a kickflip so that we can identify where along that process you might be making a mistake and figure out exactly what's holding you back from landing your kickflips in a consistent manner. So usually when skaters first start learning how to do a kickflip, once they're able to level out their ollies consistently, they'll start just practicing flicking the board out in front of them in a kickflip motion like this, just to get a feel for what they need to do with their front foot in order to get the board to flip properly. If you're currently on this step, try to flick the board so that it lands for the most part underneath you, and then stomp your front foot down on the board once it's done flipping all the way around so that you can start to get a feel for the timing of the kickflip. The next step that you'll want to start practicing is popping and flicking the board in the same way, except landing with your back foot on the board instead and landing with your front foot on the ground. This is an important step because one of the things that a lot of skaters have trouble with when they're learning how to do a kickflip is teaching themselves how to jump into the air high enough and keeping their back foot up in the air long enough in order to land back on the board with both feet. From there, it shouldn't be all that much more difficult to start landing on the board with your front foot as well, but just keep in mind that it does take a good amount of time and practice to get there, so as long as you keep at it, you'll eventually develop the muscle definition and the muscle memory necessary to start landing your kickflips. So one of the things that helped me start landing my very first few kickflips is that instead of positioning my foot right about here, which is what I do now and what seems to give me the most consistent kickflip motion, is I would position my foot a little further back and a little more pointed towards the nose of the board, because that would give me the ability to still flick the board and get it to flip without having to develop the extreme bend of the ankle that you need in order to do a kickflip if you have your front foot started out right here. So what you can do is you can start with your front foot kind of like right here, get some kickflips in, and they might be a little bit ugly. Usually when you do it like that, the board will stay tilted in this way, so we call that a rocket kickflip. But once you start landing a couple, your front foot will get used to the motion that you need to do in order to do a kickflip, and then you can slowly progress to having your foot started out pointed more towards the other side of the board. Now, when some people first start learning how to do a kickflip, they'll develop a habit that becomes so ingrained into the way that they go about popping and flicking their board that the only way they can learn how to do a kickflip properly is to first unlearn that bad habit, and then they can go about learning how to do it correctly. So on that note, let's talk about some common problems that might be happening to you, and then go over some ways that you can fix them so that you can finally start teaching yourself the right way to do a kickflip. Alright, so the first thing that might be holding you back from doing your kickflips properly is that you might not have taken enough time to perfect your ollie technique yet. To do a kickflip, you have to pop the tail of the board off of the ground with your back foot and then slide your front foot up the grip tape just like you would for an ollie to pull the board up into the air high enough before you can even worry about flicking it and getting it to level out even more using the flick. But the first part is just like an ollie, so if your kickflip attempts look kind of like this, try to go back and forth between practicing your ollies and practicing your kickflips, and focus on mimicking the same motion that you're using during your ollie, during your kickflip, so that you can get the back wheels off the ground high enough to start worrying about what you can do with your front foot. Now, another thing that skaters will sometimes have trouble with is being able to get fully balanced and centered over top of your board right before you pop the trick, which is something you're going to want to be able to do if you want the board to stay underneath you after you pop the trick. If you start to notice that your board is consistently landing in the same spot out in front of you or behind you, this is most likely the reason why. One thing that might help you get your balance a little better as you're setting up to do your kickflip would be to try to do the trick while you're rolling forward a little bit rather than just doing it while you're standing still. If that doesn't seem to be working out for you, you can also try putting your back wheels into a crack in the cement, which will help keep the board stationary while you're bending down to set up for the trick. Another possibility that might be causing the board to land out in front of you each time is that you might not have built up the confidence that you need in order to flick the board underneath you and commit to landing on it with both feet yet. Most people, when they are a little bit scared of what's going to happen if they put both of their feet on the board after a kickflip, is when they go to pop the trick, they'll lean back a little bit and the board will land out in front of them, which allows them to land with one of their feet safely on the ground. In order to land your first few kickflips, you're going to have to actively push yourself outside of that safe territory, so before you do, make sure you've got your technique of flicking the board and making it rotate underneath you one full time and catching it with your back foot, and then once you've got that down, take a deep breath and really give it an honest attempt. Now, you might end up taking a couple of spills here, but if you already have some practice falling, which you should, and especially if you have some pads on, it's not going to be the end of the world. And then before you know it, you're going to be able to start landing your kickflips without having to worry about being afraid of falling anymore. Now, some people will say that in order to make landing your kickflips easier, that you should try them on a smaller board. And to an extent, that is true. It is a little bit easier to flip a smaller board faster, but by no means is it necessary. As you can see here, I have an 8.75 inch wide board, and I'm still able to do kickflips and double kickflips on it, so don't feel like you need to go out and buy a whole new board just in order to learn this one trick. Now, another thing that has a tendency to give people a little bit of a problem is that when they imagine what they need to do in order to get the board to rotate in this direction, they think that what they need to do is to apply a force straight down on this side of the board, which would make sense if the board was just floating in the air, but it's not. It's being popped up like this, and it's already angled, and then this right here is also angled up more than just the side of the board. So instead of jumping up in the air and kicking your foot straight down, what you need to do is drag your front foot up and then flick it out in this direction, and that's going to make the board rotate the way that you want it to and get it to level out in the air so that you can catch it with your back foot. Another thing you're going to want to keep in mind about this trick is that whenever you go to pop it, you don't want to have your back foot positioned too far heel side, or else what's going to happen is the board is going to pop off of the ground and start rotating a little bit in a kickflip motion, but it's going to be too early and you're not going to have anything to kick your front foot off of. So what I usually do is I take the ball of my back foot and I position it right on this center line of the tail. And if you want to, you can even position it a little further toe side than that, but what that's going to allow you to do is pop the board off the ground and have it rotate kind of in a heel flip motion into your front foot and allow you to get a really nice strong flick with your front foot and make the board go all the way around. The last piece of advice I have for you is that you're going to need a lot of patience in order to learn this trick. Most people are going to underestimate how many hours it actually takes in order to develop the motion that you need to do with both of your feet, as well as getting the timing down between them. So even if you're not seeing a lot of progress, you just need to stick with it and try to focus on what it is that you're doing wrong that's holding you back and correcting that motion over and over again until you're doing it properly. And soon enough, you'll be landing your kickflips every single try. A good technique that you can use in order to determine where exactly it is that you're getting hung up would be to just film yourself doing a few kickflip attempts and then compare what those attempts look like to someone who already does kickflips pretty well. Just remember, it's easier to see your progress when you compare two practice sessions together rather than comparing two individual attempts back to back. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, never stop improving.